Hi folks, a quick message before today's episode on Hostel. At one point, Eli Roth's homophobic dialogue is read out, so you will hear the F word, as in the queer slur. Obviously, if you have seen the film, you're aware of it, and while Trace and I don't condone this kind of language, we did feel that it was important to discuss it as part of the episode. We also, however, wanted to give people a heads up, as this could be triggering or upsetting to some. Alright, back to the episode.
God, I loved it. I'll send you a copy. Bam! Bitch went down.
Hello, and welcome to Horror Queers. Each week in Horror Queers, we tackle a horror film with LGBTQ plus themes, a high camp quotient, or both. For lifelong queer horror fans like us, there's as much value in serious discussions about representation as there is in reading a ridiculously silly or fun horror film with a yas queen mentality. Just know that at no point will Joe or I be getting Baba shook.
It's still so sad.
What? Just like what it is?
No, that lack of Baba Shook. Sometimes I think, you know what? Aren't we missing the Baba Shook in our life right now?
Well, then in another one, you can be like, maybe we do want to get Baba Shook.
We'll save it for Pride.
Oh, God, I know, right? Wait, when is your Pride? Ours is I don't even know when Austin Pride. I've never gone to Austin Pride.
We have a Pride month. It's the entire month of June.
Jesus Christ. You're in Toronto? Ontario? Yeah. Toronto, okay.
Or to Americans, Toronto, America. No, Toronto, Canada.
Oh, okay. There was
y'all don't know provinces.
Well, isn't a province like a state?
Yes, but Americans don't know them.
Oh. Okay.
Welcome back to Canadian Geography, the podcast.
Yeah, I really don't know a lot about Canada, to be honest. And that Cole, I wish I would have responded to that damn Cole's Note thing you said last week, because I was like, I don't know what that is. But I've used context clues. Yeah, I think our Austin Pride, it used to be in July, but it was too hot here, so now it happens in September. I think that's when it happens.
That makes sense. So this week we're doing Hostel from 2005.
It's so exciting how time changes things.
Is it exciting? I was going to ask. Okay.
I mean, we'll get into it. But yeah, so Hostel. Do you want to do the facts since I did them last week, or do you want me to do it? I don't care, to be honest.
I feel like you love the facts. You make the sheet. It's so pretty. You get compliments on Twitter.
Dude, I know. I think I'm going to monetize it. Someone asked for me to send it to them for money.
It's not the only thing Trace gets asked for money on the internet.
Not at all. But that's a conversation.
That's an Instagram story.
Yes, it is. So we watched Hostel this week, directed by Eli Roth, released on January 6th, 2006, with a budget of $4.8 million, released by Lionsgate and Screen Gems. Two very big genre studios, especially in the mid 2000s.
Mm-hmm. With the backing of one Quentin Tarantino.
Yes, and that's important. For some reason.
We'll get to that.
Opened in the number one spot with $19.5 million. And for a January horror film, the first week of the new year in 2006, that's a pretty big deal, I feel like. But there was a lot of buzz about this movie going around because it premiered at TIFF in September of 2005. And I think there were 2 people that fainted during it or something like that. And, what happens with that. It's all the buzz goes around. Oh, it's so intense, blah, blah, blah. And,
which I feel like at this point, people should just discount things that happen at TIFF because apparently we have people who faint or vomit or have to get taken away by ambulance all the time.
Yeah. Something, I don't know if it was this year or last year, but that definitely happened in the last year or two at TIFF.
Yeah, it happened with Raw in 2016.
Raw, yes. Which, honestly, yeah, that set me up for disappointment with that movie. But we're not discussing Raw today.
Maybe another time.
When I saw Revenge at Fantastic Fest last year, someone had a seizure. So that was fun. Not for them, probably.
No.
Anyway, so yeah, $19.5 million opening weekend, and it went on to gross $47.3 million. Doesn't really sound like a lot. I mean, but for what was the first? No, it wasn't the first torture porn because Saw came out first. Actually, Saw 2 came out before Hostel did as well.
Mm-hmm. So did Wolf Creek, 2005.
Oh, and that was Christmas though. So Wolf Creek was about 3 weeks before Hostel came out. So yeah, I mean, they're all kind of in the same wheelhouse. But adjusted, it made $66 million. Again, doesn't sound like a lot of money, but with a $4.8 million budget, it's a pretty good number.
Yeah, good return on investment.
Yeah. Reviews, I was actually kind of shocked to find out, were mostly kind to it. I mean, it wasn't overwhelmingly positive, but you got a 61% on Rotten Tomatoes. Average score of 5.8 out of 10. Audience score, though, of a 53%. But that kind of makes sense. And then Metacritic was 55 out of 100. Here's actually something that's kind of interesting, though. So the Rotten Tomatoes audience score was 3.1 out of 5, but the Metacritic user score was 3.2 out of 10. So I guess maybe there's more discerning Metacritic users than there are Rotten Tomatoes users. So that was just something that I thought was kind of funny.
I think Metacritic is more of an aggregate, and Rotten Tomatoes is maybe not quite as much anymore, but it was, particularly when this would have been released, it was a very finely curated, select group of individuals. But the number still seems high considering how much flack horror tends to get in reviews of non-genre outlets. So that is a bit surprising.
Right. And I know we're not talking about it, but Hostel 2 got worse reviews than Hostel 1. I think it was in like the high 40s, on Rotten Tomatoes at least. So I was genuinely surprised by that. Anyway, directed by Eli Roth, also written by Eli Roth. Before this, his only film had been Cabin Fever. And then after this, he would do Hostel 2. And then, what was that? I know like Green Inferno and Knock Knock and Death Wish was the most recent, but was there something in between? I don't. Or I guess House with a Clock in Its Walls, which I constantly want to call House with a Clock in Its Walls. It's really, really tempting.
That is the porn parody, right? We've got Death. No, it probably is, but we've also got Death Wish from 2018.
Yeah, I thought I said that. Did I not say that?
No, Knock Knock and House of
the Clock in Its Walls. I know.
He's got a bunch of executive producer stuff on television, and he did the Thanksgiving short for Death Proof, which Grindhouse.
I'm still waiting on the full-length feature of, but yeah, I was really surprised at how few films he's done. Like, I really, for some reason, had it in my head that he'd done more.
No, there's a big jump between Hostel 2 and Green Inferno.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's like 4 or 5 years. So yeah, he also wrote this, starring no one particularly famous. Jay Hernandez is the biggest name. And I was shocked to find out that he is not Freddy Rodriguez, because apparently I get them confused a lot. Jay Hernandez is famous for Crazy Beautiful, the movie with Kirsten Dunst from the early 2000s, Friday Night Lights, and the recent Suicide Squad, whereas Freddy Rodriguez is from Grindhouse and 6 Feet Under and the Wolfgang Peterson Poseidon Adventure remake that's called Poseidon. And then, Derek Richardson from Dumb and Dumber and the Anger Management TV show.
Those are not great credits.
No, he was also in Men in Trees, which was a TV show with Anne Heche that apparently was good. I remember it getting good reviews, but I never watched it.
I thought for some reason I heard Boys in Trees, which is an Australian coming-of-age queer film, which is great, and I got excited, and then you said Anne Heche, and I was like, oh yeah, that. Okay.
Yeah, totally Anne Heche, not what you're thinking of at all. And then, I think that's really, I mean, the only other kind of name in it, who isn't even a name, is Rick Hoffman, who's the guy that Jay Hernandez walks in torturing the Asian girl, and
he's the American client.
Yes, the American client, and he's famous for Suits. He's a main character on this TV show called Suits. For anyone who doesn't know what Hostel is, it's basically these 3 douchebags are in Amsterdam. Looking for pussy, because that is literally all they care about in this entire movie. And they are told by this creepy guy with a really gross mole on his lip that there's this
God, I could not stop looking at that mole. I was like, is that meant to be a venereal disease?
I don't think so. I mean, maybe. I mean, I feel really bad now, because what if the guy actually has that thing on his face?
But if so, we're sorry, but also kind of not sorry, because mole.
Really gross. And actually, I do want to talk about that scene where he's like really the only scene he's in, because it was really weird. But he tells them that there's great pussy all in Slovakia at this one hostel because there's a war, I guess. Forgive me, I don't know my Slovakian history. And
apparently Eli Roth picked Slovakia because he knew that people in America would not know if it was a real country or not.
Yes, and I also want to talk about that quote because I found that quote too.
There are some choice gem quotes about this movie.
Oh, right, because you listen to the commentary, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, good. You have that. I'm excited, yeah, because that other quote I found online somewhere. But yeah, so they go to Slovakia, and because they're promised of the most magical pussy in the world, and they get it, and then they're tricked and drugged and taken to a place where an elite group of hunters called Elite Hunting, on the nose.
So clever.
Yeah. Basically tortured them for money. And Hostel 2 does expand on that in a really cool way. But Hostel 1 keeps it pretty bare bones, which watching it, I was shocked at kind of how much of like what happens in Hostel 2 informed my memory of the first movie.
And to me, the same, but also my enjoyment. Like to be honest, I kind of found it a little bit boring.
Same. I mean, I do still like it, but I was actually, because I was looking at your Letterboxd score, and you had given the first one 4 stars, and you had given the second one 3.5. So,
downgraded to 3.5 after the most recent viewing.
Yes, and I'm interested to see whenever we do get around to watching Hostel 2, if that moves up for you, or if it stays the same, or goes down. Who knows? But yeah, so that's Hostel. Joe, before we get into what you thought of it now, what did you think of it when it came out? Did you see it when it came out?
Okay, so I did see it when it came out. By this point, so we're now talking a decade after last week's movie. So
yes.
When Scream sort of reinvigorated the horror franchise, we got all the copycats, and then we moved into the 2000s, and that's when horror kind of hit a slump again. The second cycle of slashers didn't last as long as the first one, and that's when we started to get into Saw territory, which, Trace, help me out, is that 2003 or 4?
2004. Yeah, basically Saw 1 was October 2004, and then we got one of those every year until... And I may be wrong. I didn't Google this ahead of time, but I think there was a gap between 6 and 7. I think there was a 1-year gap.
Yeah, there was never more than a couple, except for Jigsaw, which, wow, let's move on. But essentially, by the time... So I had been following the development of Saw because I heard all these amazing things about it. My sister and I went to see it. We really liked it. We liked the twist. So all of a sudden then this idea that there were more graphic kind of carnage candy horror films on the horizon started to pique my interest. I missed Wolf Creek, I think because it was too small a release. But then Hostel was really high on my radar. At that time, I wasn't living in Toronto, so I didn't see it at TIFF, but I did catch it when it came out in theaters. And I remember really liking it and thinking that it was far more clever than I anticipated. Obviously, for the people who have watched the film, it's actually it's a fairly smart script in terms of the way that the first act mirrors the third act. There's a lot of visuals that play off of things. If you've paid attention to the Amsterdam stuff, they'll pay off when they get to Slovakia.
Yeah.
And at the time, I remember thinking that it was smart filmmaking. And I liked the idea that it was more of a complicated film than I had anticipated, where you hate the guys, but then it's a question of, do they deserve the punishment that they get? And, you know, all the transactional stuff. Like, I really did want to learn more about how this all came about. And maybe I'll just leave it at that and ask you. So,
well, no, I mean, I think you're totally right. I do think the script is smart. I was kind of bored watching it, and I don't want to say kind of bored. Like the first 45 minutes is kind of a slog because these guys are miserable to be around. But before we get into what I think about it now, it's interesting to me that, because Eli Roth, I do feel like gets a lot of flack, especially now. But I think he is a smart man, and he does have a knack for writing scripts. I did see Death Wish, though. So, I mean, you know.
You're not going to praise him too much.
I'm not going to praise him too much. But, I mean, like, you know, I think Cabin Fever is really smart. And I didn't see Cabin Fever in theaters, but I remember when Jordan Ladd's character, she's like the good girl in the movie, and she's the first one to get the virus and like fucking bite it. That, I mean, again, it's not new to the horror genre to kill off, like, you know, the good girl. But it's still shocking, especially considering that her face basically just like melts off. And so going into Hostel, he kind of pulls the same thing. But anyway, so Hostel was 2006. I was a junior in high school when this came out. So I was I was about to be 17. So I was 16 when it came out.
So for you, that means you were allowed to see it, or you had to go with an adult?
I was allowed to see it. Shockingly, though, I'm thinking about it now. So, because I saw Saw in theaters. I've seen every single Saw movie in theaters. I guess my mom started getting really lax. The first R-rated horror movie I saw in theaters was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the remake. So I was 14 when that came out. So, but I begged her, literally on my knees. And I think after that, like, she kind of got a little bit lazier, not lazier, but like more lax just with her, rules. So yeah, I was allowed to see it in theaters. I don't know why.
Clearly your mom did not look at the poster or watch any of the trailers.
Well, also, I'm going back to 2003 because I was not allowed to see Freddy vs. Jason in theaters, which came out in August of 2003. But then she changed her mind when I begged October of 2003 to go see Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Wow. Okay.
So, I mean, yeah. Anyway, I did see it in theaters. I saw it with my dad, and I remember really liking it. I mean, again, though, it might have played into my whole, like, oh, I'm a badass. Like, I'm 16. I'm getting to see this really, like, violent, boob-tacular movie. And, of course, at the time, I was already out. But, like, there was just something about seeing boobs in movies that I guess was, like, made me feel naughty. I don't know.
Well, it's very adult, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons, like, okay, sorry, I'm cutting you off momentarily.
That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to banter. That's what the listeners want.
I feel like one of the things that we need to raise, like, right off the top is that this film is synonymous. This and Saw are synonymous with a new type of filmmaking called torture porn.
Well, and new for 2006.
Yes, back at the time. Not so much anymore. But it's reflective of the things that you're talking about that were attracting you, for lack of a better term. Essentially, like, this is the combination of, like, violent pornography. And so for you to be like, okay, well, you know, I can go and see this adult movie with boobs and tons of gore. It's kind of the pinnacle of what horror, for better and worse, is often associated with. But I just think it's interesting that you're able to identify that it was a selling feature, and maybe in a different way than some other horror films were.
Well, I mean, like, I didn't know there were going to be boobs all over the place when I went to go see it. Like, I wanted to go see it because I knew it was going to be super gory, and it was an R-rated movie that, for some unknown reason, my mom was letting me go see with my dad. But yeah, like, again, like, when I'm watching it, there's just, like, tits everywhere. There are tits. I think there's more tits than gore in this movie. And I was surprised watching it again that even though it is gory, it's not as gory as I remember it being. It's
really not that gory at all, to be honest.
And a lot of the kills are off screen. They cut away, which that's kind of the same thing with Saw. That first Saw movie is not that gory, but people remember it as being very gory. And maybe that's just kind of a statement on how the torture porn genre evolved with the sequels, which, again, I haven't seen Hostel 2 in a while, but I mean, besides the bloodbath scene, I don't remember I guess, and also the castration. Well, yeah, the second one's gorier.
The second one is gorier, and it's more prolonged. So I've got an article that I'm going to reference later, but essentially one of the big takeaways, and it's probably one of the reasons why the second one has that lower audience score and critical reviews. So the Countess Bathory scene in the second film goes for 6.5 minutes, whereas Josh's torture in this film goes on for 5 minutes and 5 seconds.
So it's like a minute and a half longer, but also, yeah, but Josh, like, you don't, so we'll just jump into it. Josh is the good guy of this movie. He's quote unquote, because honestly, the
gay panic is
insane. But I don't remember this happening, but whenever so basically what happens is they run into this guy on the train, and this guy is like, kind of weird. He's eating food with his hands, and he talks, and he touches Josh's, Derek Richardson's knee, and they freak out. They call him a faggot, a fucking freak. And then, Paxton, the Jay Hernandez character, makes fun of Josh, and is like, oh, like, you finally got laid. But later, when they're at a club, Josh runs into this guy again. And he's outside, and he's like, hey, let me buy you a drink. And they talk, and of course, Paxton is heckling him again. He says, I don't know, he calls him a pussy or something. Or he makes a vagina symbol with his hands and calls him a pussy when he's sitting there talking to this guy that, like, touched his knee earlier.
Of course he does.
But then, like, he apologizes to him, and they kind of have a little moment, like, where the guy basically admits to being gay, but says, I chose a family, and I couldn't be happier because my little girl means everything to me. And I do want to touch onto that more because the word choice really bothers me. But then Josh touches his knee. I don't remember that happening.
Oh, really?
No, I don't. And so it was an interesting choice for me. But anyway, so Josh kind of makes amends for his douchebag behavior. And I do think there's something to be said about Josh as a character as being a latent homosexual and kind of in love with Paxton, which again, we'll get into. But yeah, so Josh is the first one to get it. He gets drugged immediately. Well, he's not the first one. Their friend Oli is the first one to get it. Also killed off screen, though. You see his decapitated head later, and then that's it.
Yeah, they don't even find his body or anything later.
No. And there's a part where like the hostile people, the elite hunters, they text Paxton a picture of Oli and the Asian girl that he was with that also was tortured. And they're sitting in front of this like tower in Amsterdam or in Slovakia. And Paxton sees it later, which kind of a big coincidence. But I also want to be like, when did they prop these bodies up in the open public and take this picture? Unless it was like just a backdrop, they just had a picture of like, in the I want to say JCPenney holiday photos. They have like the backdrops that you can take pictures of for Christmas family photos, but you don't know what a JCPenney is, I don't think. Do you?
I do, yeah. I referenced it in the last episode.
Right. No, you
after
said
confusing it for
Foley's.
Walgreens.
Oh, yeah. I can't
but yeah,
wait to go shopping for my clothes.
Yeah, it smacked of a backdrop to me.
Okay.
But I wonder if that's just one of those things where they're like, well, we know that we're going to kill so many people, and we probably can't hide the fact that all of these individuals have just gone missing after coming to this small fairy tale-esque town. So we probably need to come up with some photographic proof that they have moved on. Let's invest in a $20 JCPenney backdrop.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, Josh gets kidnapped first, and he wakes up, and he gets drilled in his leg, which they do an extreme close-up shot on, which is pretty intense.
And that's not a euphemism, folks.
Yeah, sorry.
Gets drilled.
Literally gets a power drill in his leg.
But then when okay, so the character is referenced as the Dutch businessman because they're all just various nationality businessmen. Right. But then internet fandom has called him Salad Fingers. So let's call him Salad Fingers.
Salad Fingers. But okay, whatever.
It's so disparaging, right?
Yeah.
But when he drops the drill onto the table, I love that there's a weird... obviously a prosthetic because they did not actually drill this actor in the leg, but it's got a little piece of flesh on it. And I'm like, I don't understand why the drill would have... it would have just drilled into his leg. It's... like when you use a drill, you don't pull out pieces of whatever it is you're drilling into.
Okay, so admittedly, I don't use power tools ever. But I thought that, pieces of wood or whatever you're drilling into do come out of it. Because where does it go? Because that's like the rule of physics, or something in science. Matter is neither created nor destroyed. So where does the wood go when you're drilling into it?
Well, that's why it's serrated like that. So as you're drilling, it's coming out of that. But it's...
I don't think
maybe
it
does.
I don't think you're right.
Welcome back to Queer Power Tools.
Listeners, if you're aware of if wood comes out of a drill when you pull it out of the piece of wood that you're drilling into, can you please let us know?
No, just let Trace know. I don't actually care.
No, at us, please. At us both. But anyway, and when he puts the drill down, there's also 7 more holes in Josh. Which they don't show. Sorry, that was my point. Earlier before we got on this tangent, they don't show a lot of Josh. You see the one extreme close up of the drill in his legs, and then
I think you hear the audio of him screaming and a couple more ring.
Yes, and then there's a lot of vomit. I actually really like the use of vomit in this movie. I think it's done very well. Especially when Paxton has the ball gag in his mouth and he's vomiting all over it. It's because it's so that is how your body would react to that. That is insane.
Oh, 100%. And it's really nasty looking. It's appropriately disgusting.
Yeah, it's like snot, viscousy, and it's hanging from his chin. Blah, blah, blah. And then, but you also don't see it when he cuts his Achilles tendon. Until he stands up. But you don't see the actual cutting happen. You just hear and you see him screaming. And it's a really effective scene.
And you know the trivia about that, right?
No. What do you mean?
So the trivia is that so Josh he screams twice. He screams and then he and then it kind of cuts and then comes back to him and he's like screaming even more and he looks like really, really distraught.
Yeah.
And it turns out it's because he had actually moved the chair up and down and it had essentially cut into a piece of his foot. Like it cut his toe. So that second time that he's screaming, that's full on legitimate agony because he has essentially sliced his toe nearly off, I think.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Well, Derek Richardson, if you ever listen to this, I hope you're okay. I hope your toe's fine.
Yeah, and apparently Eli Roth was like, well, if you want to get out of here earlier, like really sell the scene for me.
That's fantastic.
Move.
Yeah. I don't think he ever did any more horror movies after this because he went straight to Dumb and Dumber. Oh, wait, but yeah, that was after this. I think.
Hostel got him bigger and better things.
No, that is a word for that movie, or phrase for that movie. But yeah, so, it's not as violent as I remember. Like, I think the grossest thing in the whole movie is, it's that eyeball. It's when he has to cut the eyeball off the Asian girl and the pus just spews out.
Mm-hmm. Did you watch the unrated or the rated edition?
I watched unrated.
Okay. Yeah, so apparently it has a couple seconds more of fluid popping out.
Yep.
On set, they called that the eyegasm.
It was gross. I can do a lot of blood and gore. I cannot do pus. Pus really grosses me out. And it was like, I know you were watching the commentary, but you had the unrated version, right?
Yes.
Okay. It was like bubbling. What I love though is like when he cuts it, there's like a 2-second gap.
It's like a spurt. And then it's like dribble, bubble.
And then it just spews and it's so fucking gross. And then for some reason it doesn't dry on her face, which I don't get. I mean, I'm happy that I don't have to see that later, but I feel like it would dry on her face. But yeah, so you want to talk about the homophobia in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're dancing around it. You've done a good primer for it, but okay. So what makes the guy so unbearable in that first part?
I mean, okay, well, do you remember finding it unbearable when you first saw it 12 years ago?
I remember feeling uncomfortable and thinking that the guys were really jackasses. I mean, I was out by the time that I saw this movie, and I remember thinking, okay, wow, these guys are douchebags, they're assholes. I remember thinking when the leg scene happens on the train that it was kind of like, oh, that's a weird incident. And then, of course, you're like, well, this is a movie, so something's going to pay off later. So when that guy shows back up at the bar, you're like, okay, he's probably going to be involved in this. But I wasn't expecting that reversal where Josh actually apologizes and it seems like they come to some kind of, not cathartic, but they kiss and make up. They pat legs and make up.
Which kind of makes it, which does make that torture scene more effective. It absolutely, because had that scene not happened, I'd be like, fuck this guy, like whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, and particularly on the rewatch this time, I felt like the most interesting part of the movie is that subsection. And this is one of those things where I always have to pause and kind of be like, well, as a queer man, is it because you're naturally drawn and interested in queer stories? So to me, that's the most interesting piece. But in reading other people's reviews, it became very clear that because Josh ends up with that redemptive arc, and then it also gets cut short because he's then immediately killed, people seem to gravitate to that and think that that's the more interesting aspect of this film. And also because Pax is a terrible character, and I never care whether he lives or dies.
Very true. And, I was just thinking about, too, where I was at this point in my life when it came out, and I realize I'm backtracking a bit here, but I had come out to my parents in August of 2005. And
so it was still fresh for you.
Yeah, well, and we were still not on the best terms because, again, I went through my one session of therapy and, I wasn't allowed to date boys, blah, 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 blah. And so, again, seeing this with my dad, which, again, I was still close to my dad, but seeing it with him, I do remember the train car scene with the touching of the leg. Off the top of my head, I don't remember all the faggots. Like, I don't remember that word being thrown around so flippantly. Mm-hmm. And boy, do they throw that word around quite a bit. Like, here's just a kind of a rundown, of just some of the stuff. The first instance of which it's not really homophobia, but it's just like anti-masculinity is when Josh is wearing the fanny pack, and Paxton's like, go have fanny pack sex with him, and you can jizz all over them together with your fanny pack sex. Oh, that was homophobia because he was talking about going to the other guy with a fanny pack.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of "don't be a pussy," which I'm not really a fan of the word pussy in general. I think it's gross, not because of like what it represents. I just think it sounds gross. Like, I have nothing against vaginas. I think they're beautiful things, but, you know, the word pussy is just kind of gross. When they are in the club in the beginning and Josh, like, runs into a girl and her boyfriend comes over and Josh says, "I'll fuck your faggot ass up" to that guy. And then they get kicked out of the club and there's a big line and Paxton's all pissy and he's yelling at the people. "I don't know why you guys are waiting. It's a fucking fag fest in there. It's all fucking cocks. Don't go in there." And that was the one, honestly, on my rewatch where I was like, "Oh, fuck." Like, these guys... And I mean, this is like the first, like, 10 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, it's like, these are your characters. These are your protagonists. Cheer for them?
Yes. Then, of course, you know, there's the aforementioned knee touching. When they get to the hostel, the girl's like, "Oh, you're going to have a roommate." And he goes, "This is Paxton. Roommates, huh? That's gay." But then, of course, it's fine because it's like two sexy women in the room. Oh, no. When Paxton is having a drink with the salad fingers, Paxton does say, "Hey, Josh, faggot," like when he holds up the vagina symbol. And then I think that's kind of it with just the faggot word, which it doesn't sound like a lot, but honestly, like when you learn that that word's like a alarm sound, it really sticks out a lot.
Well, and, you know, we're talking about a film that, for the most part, like... It has essentially no dialogue in the last 40 minutes. There's very little dialogue once Paxton wakes up.
Right.
So really the bulk of the dialogue is comprised of this frat boy humor so one of the things that came out in doing some of the research for this episode is that Eli Roth ended up taking a fair amount of heat for the use of gay slurs in the film.
Oh.
And he justified it essentially by saying, well, this is the way that people actually talk, and you're not, you know, he thinks that he's legitimately portraying a subsection of people and that it's all in service of their character arc. So you're not meant to like them. You feel like they deserve what they get, but then you realize, oh, they're actually cogs in this larger machine, and these privileged white rich people are selling them, and all of a sudden then you're meant to reverse track and question those assumptions and think like, no, I do want these poor kids to get out of this hellhole.
And see, like, I do believe that. I mean, like, because honestly, I'm sure there are people that talk like that. I don't surround myself with those people, so I'm not, I can't really say, but I'm sure there are. And, you know, it's kind of a tricky question because it's like, I get what he's doing and I get what he's saying. And I do think that the movie does... There is not a lot, but there's a good bit of like dark comedy in the movie, specifically around like how, and it does poke fun at their douchebagginess, whatever. But it also kind of becomes a factor where it's like, as a filmmaker, you know, you have a responsibility to kind of represent, I don't know, whatever society you're trying to get across. Do we want to, even though these characters exist, like people like these characters exist, do we want to put them in movies where other people can see them and become influenced by them?
Yeah, or even potentially misconstrue the messaging behind the film where people just, they go to see that, they see themselves on screen and they're like, cool, bro.
Exactly.
You're like, you're not getting this. These people are meant to be assholes. Like, you're not meant to like them for that purpose.
Well, and Josh, again, could be seen by someone who's a douchebag, who's a total homophobe, that because Josh seeks redemption and makes a gay motion towards this man, then he gets immediately killed. Then that's why he got killed, is because he was gay.
Yeah.
Or exhibited gay queer qualities.
Yeah, or you flip it around and you've got a repressed homosexual killer, which was, for the longest time in Hollywood, the only depiction of queers were these homicidal maniacs. So here's this guy who, air quotes, made a choice to have a family, can't handle it, and has to go to Slovakia to kill young queers. That
is something too that, like, because all the killers in this, I guess it's really only the German businessman and the American guy. Like, do we see any of the other killers?
Well, there is the cameo by Takeshi Miike, who is Eli Roth, like, oh, I worship you. That so he's meant to be a killer, but you don't actually see him do anything. You just see him walking out of the building.
Oh, okay. I was like, I didn't even catch that cameo. But all of these men have like, so German Dutch businessman guy, salad fingers. He repressed homosexual. Cool. I mean, not cool, obviously, but and then
we're checking them off.
Yeah, the American guy
who's obviously like a tiny dicked asshole.
Yes, I was saying he's overcompensating for some tiny penis. Like that's clearly what this is. And
he drives the pussy wagon. He drove it up to Slovakia.
Absolutely, and the sequel does more of that. And it's all these businessmen. It's all these like awful, tiny, cocked businessmen that are overcompensating for something that they're missing.
Mm-hmm. That is the commentary of the second film, right?
Yes, it is. And the second one, I know we're not talking about, but it does a good switcheroo too with the two lead villains of the film that I really like. We'll see in a rewatch if it like holds up or tracks or anything, because I remember it's very sudden. But yeah, so I don't know. Is Hostel problematic? Like, if I was 14 and watching this movie now, and I'm not coming out. I haven't come out yet. I'm struggling with my sexuality. Like, watching Hostel might kind of make me feel really shitty about myself.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is another film. It's not quite on the same level as Scream, but there are tons of people who don't read Josh as latent gay, or maybe even like, there could be some of that inference, which to me on this rewatch, and partially it's just because we're looking for it because this is a queer horror podcast, but
right.
There are people who look at it and they don't see that. They just see like, oh, here's this guy who flipped out on a stranger on the train and then he later apologizes to him, and they don't see the queerness in it. And I'll confess, actually, originally I caught a glimpse of it, but I actually had to go and read a bunch of different reviews to be like, am I off the mark? Am I inferring things and seeing things that aren't there? And I came across this it's old now because it's defunct, but at the time there was a website that was run by a guy named Chris Eggerson.
Oh, yeah. He used to write for Bloody.
Yeah. And so he had a site called Camp Blood, and he would essentially just go through all these different horror movies and be like, here's what's queer in this movie. And is it worth watching? And he was like, here's all this gay shit in Hostel. Like, people can miss it, but it's totally right there. And he had all the Josh and salad fingers. And then, of course, he was like, and obviously Josh is in love with Paxton. That's why he's looking at them when they're having sex.
That was my big thing. Okay. Because on my first viewing, years ago, I've seen Hostel a couple times. Like, I mean, not a lot. I've seen Saw a lot more, but I totally forgot that. When they're having sex, he is staring at Paxton. Mm-hmm. Like, for half of it, like, he'll occasionally look at the girl that's straddling his dick, but then the other 50% of the time, he's just looking at Paxton, and they're looking at each other making sex eyes. I'm just like, what? Also, is that a thing that straight guys do? Are they okay, like, bringing girls up to their room and having sex in the same room? Straight guys, talk to me.
Straight guys, slide into Trace's DMs.
No, because there's a lot of that no homo stuff that goes on in this movie. Like, when he's drawing on Ollie's ass, like next to Josh's face.
Yeah.
And then later, Ollie, I guess it could be said because Ollie is, Icelandic? Is that what he was? I think he's Icelandic.
Yes, yeah. Because Eli Roth went to Iceland and he was like, oh my god, I love all these things. So that's why the virus is from Iceland in Cabin Fever, and that's why there's an Icelandic character in this film.
Oh, see, I don't remember the virus being from Iceland, but yes, I did know that about the actor. And then, when they were in the sauna, he again waves his penis in Josh's face, and Josh is like, get your anteater away. And it's like, okay. But again, it has that whole, like, no homo thing about it. It's like, oh no, we're not gay because, we're with these titties over here. But seriously, they're doing so many gay things in this movie. It's insane.
It is. It's that weird straddling. To me, it's more part of the no homo culture where you see it a lot, I find, in sports movies as well, like films that are centered on high school teen boys who play sports. And it's, part of that ritual where it's like they're, doing stupid shit where they're all naked in the shower or in the change room. And it's almost like, hey, yeah, like, oh, we've all got dicks and like, whose is the biggest and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, you're like, dude, that's the gayest shit ever. Like, do you not realize this liminal line that you're straddling? And please note the use of our language.
Well, and it's very strange. I mean, like, I don't get how I've never understood the no homo thing. Like, I'm like, okay, but literally but see, then maybe what I'm saying is problematic because I'm saying, okay, well, as straight men, you should be able to compare your penises and, it's not gay. It's okay because you're whatever. But it also is really gay. And so maybe it's problematic that I'm saying that. I don't really know.
Well, I think it becomes problematic in instances like this where people could see it and they could misinterpret it. Or one of the weird things that I found is I've met so many, and again, we're talking now mostly about gay men. I found there's so many gay men who come from deeply religious backgrounds or who were like hockey players, football, basketball, volleyball, whatever. Like, they were big time athletes, and they're coming from these different cultures that have that kind of like no homo idea, or it's like just repeatedly drilled into them. Like, you need to be masculine. You can't be effeminate. You can't do this kind of stuff. But both of those cultures somehow end up producing a disproportionate number of gay men.
Oh, well, okay. Here, straight guys, listen up. So if you ever are thinking about if something you're doing is too gay, videotape it and
and then put it on the internet and make money.
Yes. And but actually, you can easily do that. But you should also, put a vote, and you don't have to do it publicly. You can send it to just me and Joe, or just me. I don't know. I don't know what you're thinking, but we'll tell you. We'll tell you what we think. We'll be totally honest and not judgmental at all. So that's my spiel, as the Jews say.
Okay, I'm cutting that out.
No, that's from Bad Teacher. That's a Bad Teacher quote. She's... It's really funny, but it's really offensive.
You're not Cameron Diaz, and people can't see the motions that you're making, and so...
I know, I actually did her little hair flip when she says in that movie. She has like a little, as she's sitting on the desk all sexy, like. Anyway, so going back, it's, it's just kind of, it was weird to me to watch it. I haven't seen Hostel in about probably 6 years, because again, it's not really a movie that you just want to put on just for shits and giggles. And I was really conflicted. I mean, again, this is on the first 45 minutes. I think the last 45 minutes, because this is like a 90-minute movie, is solid. Like, I think all the stuff once Paxton gets kidnapped is great. Oh, there is one other thing. When Josh is getting drugged, like right before he gets kidnapped, he's like fantasizing about seeing Paxton in the bar where he's at. Like, because he's not there. Or like he walks outside, he walks somewhere where Paxton is not, and he sees Paxton, which really hammers in, like, he's so in love with Paxton, which...
Yeah, he's on his mind all the time.
All the time. I'd actually be very fascinated to talk to Eli Roth. And again, like I said before, Eli Roth gets a lot of flack. I actually think he'd be a really fascinating interview. And I don't think he's a douchebag. I'm sure he's a nice guy. He just tends to write real douchebag characters.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I haven't had the opportunity to see that new documentary series that he debuted at the end of last year.
I haven't either.
Okay. So I don't know whether or not he's kind of matured. I will say, listening to the audio commentary on the DVD, and there's like 5 of them. There's an executive producer cut. There's one with actors. There's one, he's on all of them. And I imagine, God, he must run out of stories. But so I chose to listen to just the one with him because I remember watching it when I first got the DVD and finding it informative. And it confirms a lot of the stuff that you may be thinking about, like how he constructed the story and what inspired it.
Does he give good commentary?
He's actually not too bad, but he does honestly come off like a very entitled novice horror fan. Like, it was shocking. So here's some fun facts for you.
Okay.
So he cites 3 films as inspiring this movie. He says, like, I was watching these movies and I just love them so much, and I feel like people may not know them, and I wanted to like really capture their spirit. The films he cites are Audition, hence the Takashi Miike hard on. Wicker Man, which makes sense because it's about an entire community essentially duping a foreigner into a sacrifice.
Yeah.
And then the original, The Vanishing, which I'll confirm not many people have actually seen that one. And it's a great film. Everybody should go and seek it out.
Yeah, I've only seen the American remake.
Do not watch the American remake. Which actually isn't that bad, but it's not great. The original one is much, much better.
Just because I know what the difference is with the ending, and I'm just like, oh, like... Again, knowing how it ends, I really have to be in the mood for to watch something that... Is it nihilistic? Is that the right word for it?
Yeah, it's so downer.
Yeah, it's a big downer of an ending. Spoilers for The Vanishing, but it doesn't have... The American one has a moderately happier ending.
Yeah, still womp, but not quite as bad.
Yeah, but Sandra Bullock, man.
Yeah, early Sandra Bullock.
Yes.
But I just find it interesting that... So he he essentially thinks that he's bringing a flavor of these underseen films. But then he goes on to talk about how he pitched this idea, and while he was doing press tours for Cabin Fever. What did I say?
No.
Oh, just
I was trying Cabin Fever. I was trying to say it at the same time. It was like a jinx. Like we said Cabin Fever at the same time.
Oh, okay. I see. I ruined your joke.
No, it wasn't a joke. I was just trying to be cute.
But he ended up like essentially catching Quentin Tarantino's ear, and Quentin Tarantino, of course, like, you know, picture Quentin Tarantino being like, "Oh my God, fuck yeah, man, you got to write that script. Everybody's gonna like lap it up, blah blah blah, jerking off motion."
I can imagine Quentin Tarantino like taking the film reels and like literally jizzing all over them and being like, "Here you go, take it back."
So he's on one of the commentaries, and I think I listened for like 2 minutes, and I was like, no, I can't do this.
I like Tarantino as a director. I don't know how I feel about him as a person.
Well, especially now, but the big piece that he had was, he was like, I wanted to make this movie. This is Eli Roth again. He wanted to make this movie and have it be up there in the, you know, the pinnacles of horror, the kinds of classics. And he says, like, I want it to be like The Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby, like these movies that people are going to watch 30 years from now. Like, yeah, let's put on Hostel. And I was just like, I'm sure you're a lovely person, but you are fucking deluded if you think you are making a modern classic with, and we haven't even gotten to the Xenophobia.
Yeah, which I do have it's a shorter list than the homophobia, but I do have like little mentions, and you may remember more than I do because I'm not as great at spotting the xenophobic stuff. But yeah, we can get to that too. But yeah, no, I can only imagine, like, he's recording this commentary probably after the movie's already in theaters, so it's like, you know, whatever. He's riding high on this amazing opening weekend for a film of this kind. Also, you know, riding Quentin Tarantino's dick. He is high man on camp. I mean, like, again,
he's sorry. I'm just thinking that's like its own porno parody, riding Quentin Tarantino's dick.
It's I mean, there's a fanfic. I'm sure that's a fan fiction out there somewhere. Someone's into it. I don't know. There's a fan fiction about everything.
We're making so many enemies.
I'm not saying it's bad if you write fan fiction where Eli Roth and Quentin Tarantino are fucking. Like, that's totally cool. There's someone out there for that.
There's an audience for everything, kids.
Yes, an audience for everything. That is what I was trying to say. So I'm sure, he was riding on this high, which probably contributed to, like, that air of snobbery. But, and, you know, as we'll learn later, Hostel 2 flopped, like, bad.
And he feels more passionately about that one.
Like, which is good.
He didn't want to make it, but I think he's actually happier with the quality of the film. And I think we both agree it is by far the better of the two films.
It is a better film. And I'm actually surprised because I've been asking people on Twitter and Facebook about this. And most, like, probably 90% of the responses I've gotten have been like, oh yeah, it is Hostel Part 2 is Roth's most, like, accomplished and, like, well put together film. I've gotten a couple that are like, what? No, that's insane. Like, the first one's way better. The second one's trash. And I'm like, I think you need to rewatch them and the first one's not trash, mind you. Like, I do think there's a lot to like about the first one, but the first one, like, the second one it just works so much better than the first one does.
Just to clarify, your poll was about those two films, not his entire portfolio, right?
Well, my poll was about those two films, but I did have people...
Because you said his most accomplished film, and I was like, well, I don't know if I would agree with that.
People did know. But so that's the thing. I was asking about those two movies, and people would come back and say, no, out of all of his movies, all of his film... Wait, I'm sorry. They were talking about his whole filmography, but what do you think is a better film of his?
Well, even now, as I'm saying it out loud and I'm looking through it, I'm kind of like, what would I say?
Like,
is actually better than
maybe Cabin Fever, maybe. But again, like, if I'm going to
Cabin Fever is such a juvenile effort. Like, it's basically all of the first 45 minutes strung out with, I would say, maybe better gore effects.
Well, there's more gore effects in Cabin Fever. I wouldn't necessarily say they're better. But there's definitely more of them. But also the, what's that lead guy's name who's from Boy Meets World? Ryder Strong. His character is more likable than any of the characters in Hostel, though. He's not perfect, but he's more likable than these guys.
Yeah, well, it doesn't take much.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, sorry. Getting back on track.
I know.
Okay, so walk me through your xenophobic list.
Okay, so I only had a couple. There was a comment about foreskin because the way it's when they're in the sauna and the anteater joke and the girls are like, "Oh, y'all are from Iceland," and Josh is like, "No, I'm from America. I had my foreskin removed." I mean, he doesn't say it like super like gay like I just did, but it's he says it very in a negative way. Like foreskin is bad, and then when the Asian girl is asking where her friend went, and she's like, he went with your friend, and Paxton's like, Ollie doesn't even like Asian girls, no offense.
Yeah, I remember that part.
There's
and apparently there was supposed to be something about that. Like, that's actually a piece that references the fact that when he goes off, or like when they get the picture and it's him with the girl, it was like, oh, that's supposed to like send alarm bells because he's a fucking racist, so he wouldn't have gone off with that girl. That's your alarm that he's dead. And you're like, that's terrible. Like, that's just not even. Ugh.
It's actually kind of funny though, because Oli, whatever, isn't like a super likable character, but he's the least homophobic out of the three. So why make him a racist?
Because they've all got to be shitheels.
Yeah. And then it's like, well, what's worse? I mean, they're both terrible, obviously. I don't even know how you compare them. But anyway, there is also a comment that I think Paxton says this, where he says to Josh, like, oh, this is how it is in Europe. Like, people leave each other and split for other countries all the time. Like, they don't give a shit about personal relationships. They just leave. Those were my big three that I caught. But admittedly, I wasn't on the hunt for xenophobia as much as I was for the homophobia. So did you have any other big ones about xenophobia?
No, I mean, I think part of it, more broadly speaking, is the suggestion that the entire town of fictional Slovakia,
right?
Like in the commentary, they talk about how they sought out this town because it kind of looks like a Disneyland-esque town, like a Beauty and the Beast kind of thing. I think the idea is that, Roth is very aware that you can't make a movie like this and set it in Wisconsin or Hawaii, right?
Right.
And we've seen other. Well, you can.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, because like, have you seen Hostel Part 3?
No.
It is set in Las Vegas.
Oh. Which kind of makes sense with the betting angle.
Yeah, it's not a good. It's actually like really bad. I was kind of disappointed. Like, I was like, it can't be that bad. It's really bad.
Okay, so we'll take that off the list.
Yes. I don't think there's any. Oh, I don't know. I've only seen it once, but that's it.
But we see that in, like, this is a bit of a common trope with some of these, and sorry, I'm doing that thing where I feel like I'm trying to go in 10 different directions at once. It's not an uncommon trope in some of these torture porn or like tourism torture porn. Like, I'm thinking of Touristas. I'm thinking of even stuff like The Ruins, where even like a bit of The Grudge, where it's stupid Americans travel to a foreign country, don't understand the language, don't understand the people, don't, essentially understand the laws, and they get into trouble in various kinds of ways. But I remember this film in particular being highlighted for that, because it's like, essentially, it's dumb white kids preying on this idea that they can go to Slovakia and get all the pussy. I don't think my delivery was quite as good as yours, but
no, I was trying to copy that guy with the mole's voice. It's there's such a. I'm not going to do the rest of it. American pussy. It's like POOOOOOSSY.
Yeah, because he's like. He's such a caricature villain, and
I know.
But all of these people are, right? Like, this idea that the police are in on it, the train station. Like, I feel like it's designed to suggest, oh, well, there was never a chance for these kids to get out. And even the fact that, Pax gets onto the train and he manages to kill Salad Fingers, but then ends up dying in the first scene of the second film.
Did you watch the unrated cut with the alternate ending?
No.
So I didn't either, but there is one. And apparently the alternate ending is he doesn't interact with the Dutch businessman. He takes the Dutch businessman's daughter on the train. And the last shot is him on the train looking at the Dutch businessman with like the guy's daughter, and like they're going on the train away. But test audiences thought that it's
too dark.
It's too dark, and there's not enough catharsis in it. And it's like, oh, well, is Paxton just as bad as these other guys? And I'm like, well, I mean, he's a terrible character.
But hey, like, guess what? The whole point of this film is it's it's like a weird inversion of the final girl trope where, you know, the only way that Paxton can survive from this experience is he has to engage in the same kind of morally reprehensible activities. Like he has to go on his killing spree to get out. And then he takes it one step further by actually going after Salad Fingers in the end.
Well,
which is meant to be morally complicated, but you're just like, meh. Like,
it is, and
because we don't care about him.
No, honestly, you don't care about him until the opening scene of Hostel 2, which again he pulls a Friday the 13th Part 2 and, like, you know, kills him in the opening scene. But it shows him with his girlfriend Jordan Ladd from Cabin Fever going through PTSD and like how this trauma has affected him. Mm-hmm. You don't get anything like that in this movie because he's a terrible fucking person.
Yeah,
and I also. Wait, sorry, no. Did you have any more on xenophobia before? Because I wanted to bring up one more thing about all the gay shit, but I can go into it in a second.
Well, I guess my one other thing, and I'm not sure if it's xenophobic or just misogynistic, but I mean, there's some fun shit with the way that women are portrayed as basically they're all hookers, and whether you want to argue that the two women are savvy businesswomen because they're in on the scheme and they're willing to get paid for luring men to their penis flytrap. But there's that, and then the fact that what's her name? I can't even remember her name because she's not
Svetlana?
A character. No, Kana, the other Chinese girl.
Oh,
the Japanese girl,
the one with that gets kidnapped first.
No, her friend.
Oh, the one that gets her eye cut off.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, she's just there.
But, like, the fact that she basically catches her own reflection at the train station, sees that she's disfigured, she's perfectly fine. She has lost an eye. That is literally the only thing wrong with her, and she decides to commit suicide by jumping in front of a train.
But, no,
like,
but there's a trivia about that, though, where she, like, the actress in full makeup, like, she looked at herself in the mirror and she started crying. And she basically told Eli Roth, like, I understand why my character would commit suicide looking like this. And so...
Oh, please.
I'm just repeating what I read on the internet, and if it's on the internet, it has to be true. Anyway, not really. That's a joke.
It's on EliRothTruth.com.
He's like, he probably has, like, a catalog book of all these defenses he has to use against the questions he's expecting to get from his movies.
No, my film's not homophobic. No, it's not xenophobic. No, it's not misogynistic.
And here's
I'm like
why.
a really good guy.
Yes. And again, for all I know, I've never seen, like, really any interviews with him to make that decision. But going back to Svetlana and Natalia, which I think Natalia's the main one, the brunette, and Svetlana's the blonde. Oh, I can't tell you.
Natalia is the dark-haired one, and Svetlana is the blonde.
Okay, Svetlana literally does nothing in this movie. I don't even think she says, like, more than 2 lines.
I don't know that she knows English.
Probably not. Natalia, though, I actually, like, really thought she was interesting. And my favorite part of the movie is when she lures Paxton away, and he's like calling her a fucking bitch, and she's like, "I get a lot of money for you, and that's make you my bitch." I wanted to stand up and clap.
Yeah, and you're like, you could kill him. You could kill him. I'd be happy with that.
Yes. And again, it's also like, okay, so his go-to is you fucking bitch, you fucking whore. Like, oh, okay, like, let's get more colorful. Like,
he's Billy 10 years later.
It's yeah, he really is. But yeah, so no, I love that whole part of the movie. And then I'm trying to think. Oh, what about Paxton like randomly knowing German, and that kind of saves his life?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't understand that was like it didn't make any sense.
The plot contrivance that needs to happen, right?
Yeah. Oh, and he's going to law school, so we should feel bad for him. Like, he's just getting his rocks off before he has to go study for the bar exam.
Or he's going to turn into one of the characters from part 2, had he been allowed to thrive and survive.
Yeah. Dude. Oh, and you know what? That would have been really interesting if, well, I don't know how they would have made that work, but yeah, for sure. And then... Oh, so the one thing I wanted to notice, I'm going to go back to the gay stuff. Have you looked at all the posters for this movie?
So I had completely forgotten. I remember that there were several posters, and I couldn't remember which one ended up being the most prominently featured. And then when I looked it up today, I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so tell them about the poster.
So readers, I'll do one, you do the other one, I'll do the other one, if you can remember what they all are.
Let me see if I can look them up.
Okay, so the first
and also they're
one,
not readers, they're listeners.
Oh, damn it. Right. Listeners. Sorry, I'm not used to podcasting. So yeah, the first one is actually the cover of the DVD. It's this guy in leather daddy, like, mask gear with a chainsaw. But the chainsaw is strategically placed to where it's coming out of his crotch area, so it looks like he has a big old boner. But the boner is the chainsaw, and he's just, in this BDSM gear. super gay. What's the second one, Joe?
Well, that was the one that I had, but I'm seeing there's another one with a man standing in like a full leather apron outfit, and he's got a chainsaw, but it's like essentially almost at waist level, and it's just pointing off to the side.
Okay.
Like he's got a crooked dick.
So I see what you're saying. Okay, I've seen that one, yes. So there are two more then. I didn't know about that one. One of them is a man getting a drill down his mouth. It looks like he's giving the drill a blowjob.
Oh, yes, I see that one. And then there's one that kind of looks like the Maniac poster where he's just holding a person's head.
Okay, but click on that one and look. So you see there's like, okay, listeners, there's a poster of Hostel, and it's just this guy in jeans, and he's holding a severed head. I think it was in an international poster. And he's holding a knife, too. But there's a text, like a review text, like a little blurb, and it's angled right over his crotch.
Right over his crotch.
And it leads into what clearly looks like an erection in his pants.
Oh, yes, it does.
Like, it is insane. It's so gay. So, listeners, go Google Hostel posters, and you're going to see some of this shit. I mean, again, I know the marketing has nothing to do with the movie itself. Like, it's not like the same people. Unless, I mean, fuck, for all I know, Eli Roth was like doing the marketing for this movie. But yeah.
The man actually in that poster does kind of look like Eli Roth from the lower body down, like from...
It's because he was just told that Quentin Tarantino was on the phone for him, and he got in a boner, like, right there. He's like, wait, take the picture right now. Take the picture right now.
I'm semi there.
So, yeah, again, not, like, super, like, want to read into it or anything, but, like, it's there. There's penises everywhere. But, yeah. So...
Which is the other title of this podcast.
Yeah, penises everywhere. Well, and that's our goal. Our goal is so that more horror films will have penises. Like, you know, we got some with Suspiria and Hereditary this year in a completely non-sexual way, but more penises. That's what we want. And then, the quote about Slovakia that Eli Roth had. Do you have that?
Oh, it's not like a direct quote.
Oh, okay. So
that was me paraphrasing.
Well, I have the direct quote, and it is this. So again, this is about, after the film came out, Eli Roth got flack for, like, his portrayal of, you know, Slovakians and, like, you know, whatever.
Because it's basically Eastern Europe fear-mongering. Like, that's what we mean by xenophobia, in case anybody's not certain. Sorry, yeah, if you don't know what xenophobia is and you haven't already Googled it, it is the intense or irrational dislike or fear of people from other countries. So, American. Yeah, a lot of Americans. But anyway, so when asked, when faced with this issue, like people complaining about how he's portraying people of Eastern Europe, Eli Roth's response was, Americans do not even know that this country, Slovakia, exists. Mm-hmm. My film is not a geographical work, but aims to show Americans' ignorance of the world around them. Okay, that's... Which again, like, you can see it. Like, he's got these interesting intentions. Like, he does know what he's doing, but then at the same time... And I'm social justice warrior snowflaking. Like, it's so problematic in the way, like, that's kind of what makes this movie so interesting, is because it's having its terrible cake and eating it too. You're just like, yes, Eli Roth, but also no, you idiot. Well, okay, so then my question to you is this, and I'm going back to, so the characters are clearly homophobic, and they clearly are xenophobic as well. Yes. Do you think the movie is homophobic and or xenophobic? And that's a very important distinction. I'm saying yes and no. Like, and that's yes, homophobic, no xenophobic, or like yes and no to both? Yes and no to both. Okay. Well, actually, you know what? I think it's yes and no to homophobic, and I think it's definitely xenophobic. You think the movie is xenophobic? I think he's capitalizing on the fear of otherness from other countries. I mean, but like, isn't that kind of what a lot of horror movies do? No, not other countries, just the fear of otherness, like, is kind of a thing that horror movies do. No, but this is tantamount to me to people making depiction, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre level, like, people from down south are all like hillbillies, they're going to eat you at their pig farm. This is that for Europe. I think you Canadians have really escaped a lot of like crazy stereotypes, minus what I've seen on South Park. Your flapping heads. It's because if you know anything about Canada, it's that we lack a national identity. So our for many people, our national identity is actually just, we're not Americans. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting that. I'm glad that y'all have just really embraced that non-identity.
That's me broadly speaking, but I can say that when I was doing my failed PhD in Canadian studies, it was literally all just like, but how do you define Canadian cinema? And I'm like, movies made in Canada with Canadian money. And they're like, we're going to need you to spend 100 pages on the Canadian national identity. And I was like, peace out.
Well, you can just make it up because it's like a blank slate.
Yeah, but then you have to talk about like, why can't we agree on this?
Okay, so yes and no to homophobic. Well, so okay, I get why you think it's xenophobic. Totally get it. What is your yes and no for homophobic? What is that? What explain that.
Well, I think the Josh storyline to me. So I think if we only had Paxton or we didn't have that redemptive piece for Josh, then I would be like, these characters are terrible. They're using all these slurs. And then, you know, you could argue they get punished for it, but I think we're just meant to infer that they're douchey Americans.
Right.
But I think because the Josh piece is in there and there's some kind of acceptance and there's it's nuance in quotation marks for Eli Roth, but I feel like he's making that attempt to say, you know what, there is that semblance of an agreement between the two characters, Salad Fingers and Josh, that it kind of feels, and then of course, like, I mean, if you want to get sexual, the idea that this repressed queer man literally gets to drill the attractive young boy that he clearly had a crush on, you know, in the torture porn, there's the pornography, the drill is the phallic substitute. Yeah. So there is that interesting queer text. So I think that's how it's having both.
I get that, and I guess I would agree. I don't think the film is homophobic. I do think it's xenophobic. I think you're totally right. But I don't know. Like, I mean, yeah, like the first 45 minutes I'm sitting there, I'm like, God, these, like, I wasn't uncomfortable, I guess, but like it's so off-putting. Like everything these characters say is like, it was a miserable 45 minutes to spend with these fuckers before they started getting killed. Well,
yeah,
I guess
they're really grating.
Yeah, it's bad, which I get is the point. And at no point but I never think that the movie is approving of this behavior. And that's why I don't think the movie is very homophobic. I do think that the movie is, but I get it. It's also kind of reveling in their behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's conflicting.
Condoning it to a certain extent and then trying to like pull a fast one and be like, oh, but aren't you sad that Josh died? But look, I'm also doing a Psycho homage, so I'm super clever.
Well, and yeah. And Paxton, you're right, doesn't get that redemptive arc, and he does kill the Dutch businessman. Like, he gets to which I might be surprised it didn't go in a homosexually themed death. Like, I'm surprised he didn't like shove something in his mouth or something.
Well, dude, it takes place in a bathroom.
Yeah, that's true. Ooh,
I gotta work in them cruising angles.
Yeah. Okay, so then last question is, do you think Eli Roth is homophobic and or xenophobic? And that's like Eli Roth, if you're listening, I'm sorry.
No, I don't. I mean, we've ragged on him a bunch. I actually think he's a talented director. I think he aspires to be controversial, in part because he's, I think, a really savvy businessman. You may or may not like the content of the movies that he's making, but he finds really smart angles and he knows how to market them and he knows how to make them on the cheap and he knows how to make them profitable. So, I mean, I don't like the fact that he's essentially leaning into bad or negative elements. Like, he's capitalizing on horrible stereotypes, which I would say is actually the worst in the Green Inferno. And that is like a whole other separate shit show. But in terms of Eli Roth, no, I don't think he is. I think he's actually a very canny, smart businessman.
Well, and again, like, you know, there were things watching it the other night where I was like, you know what? There are a lot of, specifically with the editing. I think the editing is really good in Hostel. And the editor is actually only, he did Hostel Part 2, Sex Drive, and Hot Tub Time Machine.
Very comparable films.
Yeah, clearly.
They all play on sexy fun times.
P.S. Sex Drive is really good. Hot Tub Time Machine is not. But yeah, specifically when the girl was like about to get her toe clipped off, and then it cuts to Svetlana or Natalia like clipping their toenails. I thought that was a really clever bit. But you know, there's a lot in here. He clearly has a sense of humor, and it's just a really polarizing the way he does it.
Yeah, like when people are like, oh, I hate torture porn, I hate Hostel, I can understand why. Like, there's a lot to look at this movie and be like, a lot of it is not an enjoyable experience. Like, if you...
But Hostel does get its... Like, it gets the job
It's a
done.
bad rap.
It totally does. And it doesn't deserve it. But, like, it does get the job done of what it sets out to do. For that, like, I can commend it.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Hostel Part 2 is way better at it.
Yeah, or so we remember.
Yeah, well, we will... Because that has a lot of lesbian stuff in it. So we will get to Hostel Part 2 one day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you have any closing thoughts about Hostel before we kind of wrap it up?
No, I just have my game for you for this week.
Is this going to be a weekly thing? Or are we going to keep doing games?
We could.
Okay,
or you can tell me to shut it.
Well, no, I mean, if I like it, it's fine. But, like, if it's shitty, it's... But we'll find out. What's the game?
Okay, so the game this week it's a variation of Fuck, Marry, Kill, except that it's called Archive or Trash It.
Okay.
So you can either archive or you can trash it, and we're doing Eli Roth's Filmography.
Okay, so archive meaning I like it, and I...
Yeah, like you would save it.
Oh, God, okay.
Okay, so it's lightning round style, so you have to, like, immediately pull the trigger when I tell you.
Do I get to, like, defend it or explain myself?
No, save that for online.
Okay.
And also because we're running long.
Yeah, we are right now. Okay, sorry.
Okay, Cabin Fever.
Archive it.
Okay. Hostel Part 1.
Archive it.
I thought you'd say that.
Mm-hmm.
Hostel Part 2.
Archive it.
Yeah. Okay. Green Inferno.
Oh, archive it.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
I know.
Let's take that one offline. Knock Knock.
Archive it.
Wow.
It's a campy, like, Keanu Reeves giving his best Nicolas Cage. It's not good, but it's so funny.
Yeah, it's almost like a domestic version of this. It's like, hot girls, come to your door.
Yeah, for sure.
Death Wish.
Trash it.
And then finally, House with Cock and Its Walls.
I have not seen it, but I actually have the Blu-ray, so I just haven't watched it yet. But I've heard it's decent. I've heard it's the Goosebumps sequel we all wanted. Or the Goosebumps 1. I would argue the Goosebumps 1 is not what I wanted, but that's great. But, okay, well, I think I didn't really have any other, like closing thoughts. Oh, good game, by the way. But, yeah. I guess I like it a lot. I mean, because, like, again, for me to say, like, I want to trash a film and, like, never have it see the face of the earth, like, it has to kind of be a really bad film. And I don't even think Death Wish is that bad of a film. It's just really forgettable and not very Eli Rothy. His style is not in that movie.
No, that one seemed like, hey, I've got a bathroom that could be remodeled, and you're offering me, oh, hey, Death Wish.
Yeah, and also Bruce Willis is super boring in that movie. Elizabeth Shue should have been the main character.
Well, we agree that Elizabeth Shue should just always be the main character.
Always. I mean, God, she had that piranha and then, like, just nothing after that.
Oh my God, piranha.
I don't have anything else I want to talk about. I mean, we've hit a bunch of stuff, but I do have one crazy bit of trivia that I think is really cool. So the music in this movie is, I actually really like it a lot. And the music is done by Nathan Barr. Do you know what he's done music for?
Roseanne Barr's Bar Mitzvah.
Okay, no. He did all, like, the score for all 7 seasons of True Blood. And, wait. Here's the good one. All 6 seasons of The Americans.
Oh.
Right?
Interesting. What a weird career trajectory.
Yeah, and he's done more. I just couldn't fit it all on my cheat sheet. But, like, he's done a lot of TV. But yeah, so when the credits rolled for Hostel, I was like, oh, this is, like, a pretty good score. And it was kind of reminiscent of that Americans theme.
Yeah, and we both heartily enjoyed The Americans.
Oh, yeah, I love The Americans. And I love the first, like, 3 seasons of True Blood, so...
I covered the entire series of True Blood back when my blog was still doing TV, so if you ever want to see me just mentally deteriorate in, like, rapid-fire succession, just go and track down all of my True Blood recaps, because they just get, like, angrier and more frustrated with each episode.
As one of the worst final seasons of any television show I've ever seen in my life. Like, they really just shit the bed with that one.
Oh my God. So bad.
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, well, this has been your True Blood podcast.
Don't watch True Blood. Do watch The Americans. And maybe watch Hostel. And definitely watch Hostel Part 2. Cool. Well, this has been our discussion of Hostel. Joe?
Well, I was going to say, if people like the show, you should rate and review it on whichever podcast place you're getting it from. I'm sure Bloody Disgusting would love it, since they are sponsoring us on this, that they would love to hear that now that we've offended
a lot of
different people.
A lot of different groups of people. And then you can also email us at, is it horrorqueers@gmail.com?
It is, yes.
Okay, super easy. Email us at horrorqueers@gmail.com. You can tweet me at Traced Thurman.
Yes, and you can tweet at me at B stole my remote. That's the letter B.
I guess you're just really used to saying that, but okay.
I do have multiple podcasts, so yes.
Oh yeah, that's true. And that's it, I guess.
That is it. So what are we doing in the next episode?
My DVD came in today. So wait, no, sorry. That's 2 weeks away. That's 2 weeks away.
I got so excited.
I got really excited because the DVD cover for what we're doing in 2 weeks is really kind of cool.
Yeah, it's Thirst Trap the movie.
It is.
Anyway, what are we doing next week?
What we're doing next week is Karan Kusama's Jennifer's Body.
Yes.
Which I really like, but you have made it clear that you don't, but you haven't seen it since you saw it in theaters.
I've seen it once since then, and I re-like it.
Okay.
Or like it.
We'll go for that.
For the first time.
Yeah, I will try really hard to not make that an In Defense Of podcast episode, because I might fall into that trap, so you got to watch me.
No, we don't need to defend it. We talked about this in the first episode. That movie got resuscitated this year.
It did. Okay, so yes. So all you horror queers out there, or allies also, see you in a week.
Yes, so you are now welcome to get your babashuk on.
Yes, you are. We have to come up with a new phrase.
Get in, losers. This is the Lady Killers, a feminine rage podcast. I'm Jen.
I'm Sammy.
I'm Rocco.
And I'm May. Our podcast is a tribute to the female-identifying killers in horror and more.
Each episode will feature us, your Supreme Court of female murderers, discussing our favorite lady killers, from your Julias and Jennifers to your Carries and Christines.
We'll tell her story, decide if it's good for her horror, and answer the most important question of all: would we die for her?
Join us on Thursdays as we pull on our sweaters, snatch our ice picks, sharpen our scissors, and honor the lady killers who live on the silver screen.
No boys were harmed in the making of this podcast.
Yet.
Hello, I'm Shelby Scott, the host of Scare You to Sleep, a podcast where I tell you spooky bedtime stories full of creepy sound effects and music that is soothing yet unsettling to help immerse you into a world of horror. This is a show for those of us who have realized horror can be a strange but relaxing escape from reality. Speaking of escapes, sometimes I lead you through guided nightmares, like a guided meditation, but instead of flowery meadows, I take you on a journey through your own personal nightmare. So come get lost in the terror with me. Listen to Scare You to Sleep wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us online at bloody.fm. Sweet screams.